Well, welcome to today's edition of New Knowledge. We're very excited to have with us Chad Thompson. He is actually the marketing and events manager for the town of Abingdon, where he's been for a couple of years. Before that, he was a marketing manager for the Friends of Abingdon. He's a graduate of Virginia Intermont College, where he had his BA in photography and digital imaging. And so he's a great guy, loves to make brands shine. He's a great storyteller, and he's going to talk to us today about developing an annual marketing calendar. So please welcome from the town of Abingdon, Chad Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. I'm excited to be here and talk about this topic. It looks like I might need permission to share my screen if I can get that. I'll try to make today's topic as least boring as possible. Sometimes these things aren't always the most fun things in the world, but I think when it comes to marketing, you can have a lot of fun with what you do. And I'm a very visual person, so I try to do things as visually as possible. So let me see, and let me minimize these graphics. So, all right, so Mark, you did a great job introducing me. So I am the marketing and events manager for Visit Abingdon, Virginia right now. I'm also a small business co-owner of the bookseller here in Abingdon. I co-own that with my wife, Megan. That's actually a recent self-portrait I did of myself, kind of paying homage to my time at Virginia Intermont College, being a photography student, as well as trying to just get a cool artsy photo within inside of our bookstore. I'm also a freelance storyteller, and essentially what I mean by that is a photographer, videographer for hire. So I do a lot of different types of work within travel tourism, more of your service-based businesses. So I really feel like what we're going to be talking about today ties into a lot of these different areas because I create marketing calendars for my small business. We definitely do that here in the tourism department at Abingdon, and then we'll just kind of take a deep dive into some of those methods. So when we're thinking about marketing calendars, marketing plans and strategies, organized planning and thinking are huge pieces of this. In fact, my team here at Abingdon, we took a whole day just to have a planning session of kind of what we wanted the year to look like. And we're taking in advice from our advertising companies, our public relations companies, our businesses here in town, and then what we see from data-driven metrics that actually work. But I noticed a lot of people on the viewer list today are from all over. So we've got destination marketing organizations, small businesses, and different types of people in between. So I'm going to try to pitch this out so that way everybody can at least get something out of today. But why a marketing calendar matters. So it helps you to keep your business organized, your marketing campaigns in gear, helps you align promotions, content, and campaigns with your business goals. It helps to reduce last minute stress and improves efficiency. And I can tell you, even if you do extensive planning and you have that calendar ready to go and everything's nice and neat in place, there's still going to be things that pop up and are going to cause lots of stress here and there. Maybe you win some award, maybe there's some kind of big new thing taking place in town, maybe there's a change that's made to your business that you all of a sudden have to pivot and include that in your plan some way. And we'll talk about those things when we get to that point. But what we're going to talk about and really learn today is the key components of a marketing calendar, how to create a structured yet flexible plan, and then also practical steps to help you streamline your marketing efforts overall. So the foundation of a strong marketing plan is, setting clear goals and objectives. So you want to pay attention to your brand awareness, revenue growth, customer engagement, event promotions, increasing productivity. That's just a few pieces of the total iceberg, and it's going to look different depending on who you are, what your goals are. Myself working in the tourism industry, my goals are to get people to town, to do whatever I can to promote our destination, our attractions, our businesses, outdoor recreation opportunities, but also to study the data of the people that are coming here to determine which one of these elements become my main goals and objectives to increase that overall visitation. Whereas me on the small business side of things in my bookstore, My goal there is to take the people that the tourism department is getting to town and convince them to come shop at my shop on a smaller level. And the way that we do that is by identifying key audiences. So before you even start doing your marketing, making your plans and your calendar, you need to think about who are you trying to reach, what platforms do they use, and how do they consume their content. So for example, the audience that I'm promoting to here at Abingdon Tourism is way different than a lot of the small businesses in town are promoting. And at our tourism advisory committee meeting, actually just yesterday, we brought together a whole bunch of different zip code data from different types of entities within the town of Abingdon. So us here at the Tourism Center, our larger scale attractions like Barter Theater, William King Museum of Art, Southwest Virginia Cultural Center and Marketplace, and then some of our small businesses. And what we found is that our audiences do cross over a little bit here and there, but we also have a lot of significant differences. Our local retail businesses, we found that they have a higher engagement with a more local audience, whereas the bigger attractions and obviously the tourism department have a much broader audience. So by knowing that, that helps us create things known as target personas. So I gave you an example here of one of the target personas that I market to at my small business. So being a bookstore, Literary Leah. She's a 38-year-old local who loves the charm of small towns and has a deep appreciation for storytelling, history, and the smell of old books. She shops small, supports the arts, and is always up for a cozy community event. I know that she's between the ages of 30 and 55. She's middle income. She values experiences over luxury, and that is a huge thing to think about as we're talking about the content here in just a minute. I know that she's college educated, she's in liberal arts or education related studies, she enjoys reading and so forth. And there's a lot more information that you want to create. Typically, I think it's good to have about 3 to 4 or even 5 of these personas, because if you don't know who you're marketing to, you're not going to know what to create for them to enjoy. So over time, as you start crafting things for your social media, your ad placements, whether that's print or digital, you're going to start to learn who your ideal client is. You're able to create one of these personas using data, and then you're going to be able to market to them better. I kind of hit ahead just a little too quick, because marketing isn't one of those things where you could just put one thing out and everybody's going to love it. If that were possible and I knew how to do it, I'd probably be retired by now, because I think that's an impossible task. But my audience for my small business is going to be different than the small business across the street. So that's why it's very important that we think really hardly about who we are actually going to be marketing to, who we want to come in our business, our destination, and so forth. But types of marketing activities to think about after you have that audience figured out, you know who you're marketing to, think about different ways that you can market to them. So is that social media and content marketing like Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, YouTube? Those are all great free resources to utilize, and most everybody is going to be on social media. And if you run a business and you don't have social media, you're greatly missing out on a lot of opportunities to connect and to tell your story. We also have paid advertising and promotions, email marketing and newsletters, huge. I can tell you from both my role here at the tourism department as being a business owner, my email marketing list is one of the strongest pieces of marketing I have, because I know for a fact I can get whatever marketing message or story that I need to tell into somebody's inbox. Whereas a post on social media, sometimes people might not see that till a few days later, or if they even see it at all. You also want to think about events and community engagement. How can you be involved with what's going on? Here in the tourism department, we work really closely with a lot of other groups in town to help elevate and promote events. And sometimes we put on events of our own. So it's important as a business owner or someone who wants to be involved with those things to pay attention to when big things are happening so that you can gear your marketing towards that. And when we look at the calendar, some of this stuff will make a little bit more sense. You also want to think about seasonal and holiday campaigns, as well as any product launches that you might have or special offers. So then this is where you want to choose your channels. So different types of channels are owned things, which is your website, your blog, your email list. I feel like those are safer platforms because they can't necessarily be taken away. Think about TikTok, for example. So many people have built their life and their business on a single platform like TikTok. That was a terrible mistake for a lot of people to do, but we're talking about the possibility of it getting taken away. Whether or not that happens, I have no idea. But if it does, and anybody has built a business on that platform and they haven't diversified themselves enough, that business could be wiped out in an instant. Whereas your website, a blog, or an email list, you own that. Somebody can't necessarily just take it away from you one day from the next. Whereas social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube and TikTok, they're all phenomenal places to go, but just don't put all your eggs in just that basket. You also have paid media opportunities like Google Ads, social media ads, print, TV, radio. The possibilities to advertise in this day and age are basically endless. But where you advertise is critical with your calendar, because if your audience isn't in those places, then they're not going to see the ads and it's going to go to the wrong people. So here's how we start mapping out this calendar. Once we know who we're marketing to, where to market to them at, what type of content to create, we've got to map out what the content is and when to position it. So I like to start with the year by breaking it down into different subsections. So I always start with the quarters. So I do January to March. We start focusing on the new year. So like in my bookstore, we promote a lot of self-improvement books. We try to push out journals, just things that are trending during that time of year. Everybody's coming out of the holidays. They're super pumped about this new year. So how can you market to them to get them excited about whatever your product is? We still got some winter promotions going on during that time. So pushing those things out. And then when we look ahead at Q2, I'm talking about spring events and summer preparation. What do we have coming up that you can enjoy during that time? Q3, this is a popular time for back to school and fall planning, especially if you're in the Southwest Virginia area. Leaf peeping is a huge opportunity. October is one of the most heavily trafficked times for tourism because of how beautiful the fall scenery is. And then finally, we're wrapping it up into Q4 with the holiday season and just year-end wrap-ups. So when you break it up into those sections, it helps you to think on a smaller scale. It doesn't make the idea of a whole entire year being so far off into the distance. And then while you're doing that, think about key dates and industry events, holidays, local events that go on. Here in Abingdon, we have Plum Alley Day coming up in May. We have the Fiddlers Convention in June, Virginia Highlands Festival in July, and a lot of other things sprinkled all throughout. So if you're a business owner or a destination, think about what is going on in your communities that you can piggyback off of, and then you can amplify. Maybe you can be a supporter of those things. Think about your product launches and just different sales periods that's going on. And then once we get our quarters figured out, that's when I like to jump down to a month by month basis. So I like to choose an overall arching theme for the month. Maybe it's spring fever, maybe it's March Madness if you're a sports related business. But when you choose that theme and that focus, that's going to help you bring up or break into the weekly content as we move forward in that process. But you could schedule your major promotions and content in advance, but always leave a little bit of space for flexibility. So an example of that in May is the 2-year anniversary of our bookstore. So we're very excited about that opportunity. In hindsight of gearing up for that and another large scale event, we missed the fact that coming up here in 3 weeks is Independent Bookstore Day. And so we had to pivot and be flexible to add in a brand new event that we hadn't really been planning. So always being ready to catch those things as they come and add that to your calendar could be huge to help with your marketing. And then after we get the month themes planned out, I like to jump into my weekly content breakdown. So one thing that I do to help me out is set reoccurring content types. So Tip Tuesdays, Feature Fridays. We do that through the tourism department. We do it through our small business. Is say Mondays at our bookstore, we're featuring local authors. So every week, everybody kind of knows that's what's happening. And then maybe another day of the week, you're focusing on something else. If you're a destination marketer like myself, maybe on the weekends, on a Friday, you post some fun things going on in your community for the weekend. I know that's a pretty positive trend amongst a lot of destinations. I know Bristol, we tend to do that through our calendar, and then Damascus does it as well. But what you want to do is to balance both promotional and educational content. Sometimes you just have to put content out there that promotes your products, promotes your services, and it doesn't always get the best engagement, but you make up for that by providing educational pieces. You tell stories, you create the things that people love to see. An example of that might be a behind the scenes look into something that you are working on. Plan that as a piece of content to go on your calendar. And maybe put that out a day or so after you put out a piece of content that maybe people didn't really care about, but it's one of those things you have to bring awareness about it. And when we're thinking about this calendar, there's a lot of different tools out there that can help us build that. We've done the planning stages and we're all ready to go. So now it's time to choose a place to put this plan into action, put it onto something tangible that we can ultimately turn it into our marketing. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can use something as simple as a Google Calendar or Outlook for just a very basic planning module. There's a lot of great social media schedulers out there. I like Buffer because it's pretty affordable. It's really good about showing me how to get to comments that I might have missed. So I'm always being able to engage with people on social media. But it also will show me my content in a nice laid out calendar. It's very easy to use. They do have a free plan where you can have up to 3 social media accounts. There's some other limitations there, but for the most part, most of you could probably benefit from a free social media calendar. But do I think it's worth it to pay for them? Depending on how strong social media marketing is for you and how big that calendar planning is, I think they could be huge to go ahead and just pay for it. But then there's a lot of other task management software such as Trello, Asana, and ClickUp that can help you plan. But the one I'm going to show you today is called Notion. You could also use something like Airtable. And essentially, they're just custom databases. You could also use Google Sheets. You could use Microsoft Excel. But I'll show you why I prefer Notion over Excel or Google Sheets. And it's also free. So I try to show everybody as much free options as possible because I understand that marketing can be very expensive at times. But when we're getting ready to put this calendar together, before we actually get into the hands-on portion where we're going to create a calendar so you can see what that looks like, you want to think about the 80-20 rule. So I talked about the educational content and then the value-driven content just a minute ago. So think about this in 80-20%. So 80% of the content that you put out into the world of marketing, should not include things like come buy stuff, spend money with me. It should be more about that storytelling aspect and getting people excited. I used to have a colleague in the tourism industry before he retired, and he was like, you don't want to take the steak straight to somebody's table, or think about when you go to the Mexican restaurant and you get the fajitas and you can hear that sizzle on its way to your table. Well, that's the 80% of the content. You're building up that hype and excitement. You're building that mindset for that moment that fajita is going to be in front of you, and then that 20% is when you actually get to eat it. So if you think about it in that sense, it's really going to help you do that mix, because the 80% of content is what's going to build that trust, that loyalty, and that connection with your audience. Whereas the 20% is hopefully going to achieve the sales side of things because you've already built that connection. And the way we do that is through consistency versus overloading. So think about how many newsletters you've signed up for, and they hit you with so many emails that you just can't handle it. You can't read them all, and it just clogs everything up and it distracts you, so you go and unsubscribe. And then think about the email newsletters that don't come out as frequently, but they provide you with a lot of value, and then you stay subscribed to them. And then when that one sales pitch hits, you're more likely to buy the product because, one, they haven't got on your nerves for overloading your inbox, but they've also given you so much value that you almost feel guilty to buy their products. And that's just a great salesperson. But you also want to leave room for some spontaneity in trends. Trends and things pop up all the time. Years ago, it was fidget spinners. When I was young, of course, it was Pokemon cards and yo-yos. So there's always things that's going to pop up. Maybe it's a trend on social media, some type of dance or some kind of prank you play on somebody. And there's always kind of fun, creative ways that you can mix those into your marketing. Think about, just yesterday was April Fool's Day. A lot of people hopped on that trend and started doing April Fools. I didn't go that route, and I put out some serious posts, and who knows if people believed them or not. But that's an idea of a trend that you can jump into and take a part of. So then we think about adapting and adjusting the plan. So after you've created your plan and you've put it out there, you've put it into action, maybe some things aren't really working that well. Well, how do you measure that, and how do you determine if you need to pivot or change things? Well, you look at things like your engagement metrics. If you're using an emailer like MailChimp or Constant Contact, it's going to tell you how many people opened the email, how many people didn't get it, how many unsubscribed, how many people clicked links, what links did they click. So look at those metrics, see what works, and then the things that do work, do it again and again and again until it doesn't work. And then the things that don't work, change them. You can look at your website traffic, your sales and conversion, and then, what should you just start and stop? Is there new things? Listen to what the people are telling you. Some of them are going to tell you directly, but others are going to tell you through the data that you collect. So here's an example look of a marketing calendar, and I'm going to actually take us into Notion here in just a second so we can deep dive into these different sections and just kind of go through that process and see what it looks like. So everything we talked about up to this point, figuring out who the person is, the quarterly breakdown, the monthly, the weekly, now we're actually building out what we want to say to people. So this is kind of what it looks like. We've got our content, so the message that we want to get out to everybody. I've got listed the date this goes out. This is all just a mock-up, by the way. None of this is actual content from a real company or anything. I've also got my marketing type, and we'll look into that in a second, but is it going to be an email newsletter send? Is this going to be a social media piece? Am I going to launch a product? Am I going to buy advertising? I've also included my marketing channels so I know where it's going. And one reason this can be important is every social media channel, your website, TV advertising, there's going to be different sizes and portions and requirements for different types of media, especially when it comes to video. So you got to think about that ahead of time, because if you're going to be creating this very robust video that is great for broadcast, it might not be the best performing video for an Instagram reel. So I like to document what channels that I want that marketing piece to go out on and when I want it to go. Also list out my quarter. So these are all a part of Q2. And this is the reason that I like Notion, which is a free resource, better than say Google Sheets, is it does handle files and media, which I believe some spreadsheets you can do that too. But the way that Notion does it, that I'll show you here in a second, makes it really cool. And then finally, my content category. So either sales or value. So you can see that I've tried to push the 80-20 rule here. The majority of my posts are going to provide value to my end consumer or audience, target audience persona, whereas 20% are ultimately going to be my sales goals. So let me hop into Notion really quickly and show you what this looks like. So this is this is what the screenshot was here, but we can go into all these different content sections and start changing this however we want to. So this is spring cleaning and Easter sale. So that's going to come out today. I want it to go out on Facebook, Instagram, and it looks like I'm even going to do a TV or radio spotlight here. And it's going to be a seasonal campaign. So let's say maybe I'm some type of retail shopping experience and I want to sell off some of my winter clothes to get ready for all the spring stuff. What's cool about Notion is I can create as many of these posts as I want. I can go ahead and put the whole year in here. I can do it just by quarters. You can filter however you want, but this is the coolest part. This is why I use it over Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel. I can create this gallery view of what I have going out, because if we're talking about Instagram in particular, there's something called a grid. and it may or may not be as important as it used to be, but as far as brand awareness and just showcasing your brand's look across an overall spectrum, this is a great way to see that layout. So now I'm able to see all the marketing that's going out visually across the board. I can see that my brand looks consistent all the way across with the photos. I can see what types of photos are going to go out. And then from here, I can see kind of the bird's eye view of what the story and the message is that I'm trying to get out to my end consumer. And if I feel like one of these things is out of place, like let's say, this photo is nice because it says it's open, it's inviting. Here's a smiling person. There's a person here that looks happy to be shopping. And maybe these photos don't feel so warm and inviting because the person has their back to the camera. This photo is a little bit darker than the others. There's not as much color contrast. Well, I could go in here and take note of that. I could add a comment, and maybe if I'm working as a part of a team, I could say, consider changing the image. Feels too dark and isolated. Now, a lot of you sitting here listening today might think to yourself, wow, a team, that sounds really nice. Well, I too am, for the most part, a team of one when it comes to a lot of this social media content building stuff. So really that note was just for myself when I go back into it later. So you can either change it right then on the fly or change it later. And I guess I want to interject something real quick. There's a method of productivity I like to use called getting things done. And one of the premises of that is that if you can complete a task in 2 minutes or less, go ahead and get it done right then in that moment. But if you can't, make a note, delegate it, do it later. So in this case, it might take me more than 2 minutes to go find that image. So leaving that quick comment is a better option than just changing out the image right then and there, unless it's due today. Then we got a problem. But if you notice through here, looking at the dates, that's quite a bit of marketing posts that I have planned out for the month of April. But you'll notice they're not just one after another every single day. I've got this on April the 2nd, which is a Wednesday, and you can see this is on a Friday. So what I've came up with here is a 3-day marketing plan. And that's typically how I like to do things. I think dividing it up between 3 or 4 days a week is traditionally the best. And then staying consistent with the same days of the week works really well. The reason why is this is just talking about social media, but you just stay fresh on everybody's minds. They can expect updates on XYZ days or whatever days you choose or however many days you choose. And I think the most effective thing is going to be different for everybody. If you only have the time to commit 2 to 3 days a week to really being active with your social media or whatever else it is that you're working on, then that is your maximal. I find that when you try to achieve more than what you're capable of, or you try to get involved with more marketing outlets than you can handle, typically things start to fall at the wayside. So if all you can handle is Facebook and Instagram and maybe an email newsletter that goes out once a month, then that should be your 3 marketing focuses, and do them very well. Don't try to add in TikTok and YouTube and all these other things just because you've heard that it's the thing, because certain platforms work better for certain businesses. And it all boils down to who your audience is. Things like age demographics, locality, they're all different factors in where your audience is going to be. Like I know for my bookstore that TV and radio advertising, because of our target demographic, are not the best places to market. So we choose not to market there. The best places for us to market is Facebook and Instagram, our email newsletter, and then the old-fashioned way of printing off flyers and handbills and sticking them out throughout town. Whereas from the larger tourism side of things, everything on this list is things that I use, and I use so much more. So what we try to do is to tell the stories of different businesses. We do that through travel writers and influencers. So those are additional forms of marketing that some of you larger scale departments might be thinking about. And I didn't mention them in today's post because I feel like the majority of people on this call are going to be more small businesses and working with the smaller businesses. But you would add that in as a marketing type in anticipation that you're going to have them throughout the year. And then how are you going to utilize that content? What stories are you going to tell with that? And there's really no right or wrong way to doing this. I guess I would argue that the only wrong way to do a marketing calendar is just to not do one at all. So what I find that works best is you might look at my calendar and be like, wow, that's way too overwhelming. It's too complex. I don't like it. And that is okay, because everybody's going to create something that is going to work best for them. And you're going to adapt it to make it the best thing possible for you. I've been shown ways to do this in just Google Sheets, where it's just more or less you type in the day, what you want to say, and you just are kind of doing like a quick brainstorm. So you can make it as simple or as complex as you want. It all depends on your time. And I know everybody's time is very valuable, and we don't all have the time to sit down and do this. But once you get in the rhythm of it, this entire calendar, just coming up with random ideas and trying to plug and play for this artificial business, I think this maybe took me like 20 minutes to put this together. But what it's done is given me a clear vision for the entire month of April that I can then go and transfer this over to each of these different marketing outlets. Now, I still got to go create the newsletters. I have to find the images, and we have to get everything posted. So really, you could sit down for an hour or two each month and really focus on getting your marketing ready for the entire month. One of the ways that makes it possible for me to focus on so many different channels, because even here in the tourism world, I'm running the Visit Abingdon tourism side of things. We have a website, a newsletter, the social media. We work with advertisers, PR firms. So there's multiple columns I'm dealing with. So if I didn't have a plan and a calendar in place, I would have no idea where I'm at. So that's essentially how I'm doing this, this marketing calendar. Let me pull our presentation back up here and talk about a couple of mistakes. So if you don't plan far enough in advance, before you know it, you're going to run out of content. You know, you could plan weeks or months ahead of time and get everything scheduled and structured and ready to go. And then before you know it, that last day of marketing material or that last week is steadily approached and you don't have the next steps ready. So always keep in mind, I usually set a calendar reminder about 2 weeks before my marketing content's about to run out to go ahead and get started on the next batch and get everything preloaded and going so I can stay ahead in case random meetings pop up or I have a sick day or something else just goes on and takes my attention away. You also don't want to overload the schedule, so that can also become very overwhelming for both you as well as your clients and your audience. So make sure you're not putting too much out into the world, that you give it time to breathe. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to remember to take a deep breath and be able to soak in what you are putting out there. Another common mistake that I see a lot of people make is ignoring data and analytics. There might be times you think you have the greatest idea in the world, but your data and analytics are telling you that is not a good idea. Please do not do this. And then you proceed to do that idea and the result is not what you wanted. And then the data and analytics are over here kind of whispered in your ear, I told you so. So it's okay to try and test new things. That's not an issue. But always follow your data and analytics. It's, you know, marketing is not just throwing a dart at a dartboard and hoping it lands at the bullseye. It's walking up to the dartboard and sticking the dart in the bullseye because you have the knowledge to do that. You also don't want to be too rigid and you don't want to have a lack of adaptability. I've worked with a lot of organizations and businesses and groups that will say, I would love to have your advice. This is working because of XYZ. Can you help? And then you go in, you give the advice and say, hey, here's what you need to do. Well, we've never done it that way. We don't want to do that. We want to keep doing what we've been doing. So you've got to be willing to adapt. One of the hardest things for me as a photographer was accepting the fact that vertical photos and videos have to be a part of my process. And I've been fighting that for years. both internally and externally, but it's just one of the facts of the day is that if you're going to be doing social media content, you've got to incorporate some vertical stuff. So always be willing to adapt or at least follow the trends or go with what's popular at the moment. And as far as the overall things, that's what I have as far as how I create the marketing calendar. And I knew there would probably be some questions. Maybe some people need some specific insight into things. So I'm happy to dive back into my sample calendar, cover any of the sections that we've talked about today. An hour is kind of tough to fill on talking about a subject like this, but I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can.
Any questions for Chad? You can put them in the chat or just take your audio off and ask away.
Oh, picture, stock, or reel. Okay, so I use stock pictures in today's example just to make it simple. But I think using real photos is going to win 9 times out of 10. There might be times where it's okay to pull a stock photo, but I would try to do that very sparingly. And one of the issues I'm seeing right now, a lot of people are using artificial intelligence to create images, especially restaurants. If you are a restaurant, if you can't take 2 seconds to take a picture of a fresh meal that just came out, but you're going to ask artificial intelligence to do it, don't even do it at all. Because it's kind of like the McDonald's factor, I guess. You see that big, beautiful burger, even though you get to the restaurant, you know it's not going to be any good. But yeah, anytime you can take the picture, take it. Because one of the popular things now is just doing it from your phone. You know, you don't need a flashy camera. In fact, a lot of times the more authentic looking photos are what's going to perform the best, at least when we're talking about social media. Oh, thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. Oh, yeah. And definitely, I think, and I guess to elaborate on the photo part, I do a combination of well-polished images mixed with the cell phone images. So it kind of depends on where you're marketing. You know, if I'm going to take out a $10,000 full page ad for the tourism department to promote the town of Abingdon, in that case, I'm probably going to have the most well-polished, professional-looking images that I can. But if I'm just doing social media posts or creating fun little things, I'm going to go more the cell phone route and kind of make it look more like the everyday user created it, so that the everyday user can relate to it.
What about blooper videos or social media?
I think those can be great. It kind of depends on what your wheelhouse is, but everybody loves to have a good laugh and everybody likes to see that we're all human. I think that's one of the things. Sometimes marketing can go a little bit too far into the world of sales and marketing, and we forget to be human. And at the end of the day, that we're marketing to people. So the more that you can connect with somebody, whether that's a behind the scenes or a blooper reel, as long as it's something that's tasteful and works for your audience, I think that's a great thing to do. Oh, you're welcome, Pam. Chelsea, that's a great question. So one thing that I try to do is take as many photos as I can in-house. It's really hard sometimes because of time constraints, just to get out on the streets and take photos, especially because I know in my destination, you know, we are a smaller destination in comparison to larger cities, but I still work with about 120 plus businesses across meals, lodging, and retail. So for me to actually go out and photograph every business and keep their photos up to date is nearly impossible. So one thing we did, if you are a Virginia DMO, we wrote a Virginia Tourism grant a couple of years ago to hire a professional videography and photography team to come to town and photograph across all the seasons. So now what I have is a big arsenal of a DMO is a destination marketing organization. So essentially your tourism department. But what we did is we had the photo video team come in. Virginia Tourism grant covered the bulk of the cost. We wrote some of it into our budget as well. And they just got us basically our wish list of photos. So those act as our well-polished photos that we use in more of our high-end advertising, not necessarily our day-to-day all the time. But I've also hit the streets and got photos. And then a lot of times I'll ask my businesses, because I have some businesses in town that do a phenomenal job at taking photos every day. I've got one restaurant that's like their shtick. Every day it's like, hey, here's what's for lunch, here's what's for dinner. And they're all on phone, but they look great. So yeah, I would consider things like that, you know, hitting the streets with a cell phone. I've got a cheap, I don't think I have it behind me, but we wrote a grant last year and was able to get like just a cheap mirrorless camera for like $500. So I use that sometimes to take photos that are better than a phone, but not quite the super pro level. So you can just kind of mix it up a little bit. And artificial intelligence, I wouldn't say it's end all be all. I'd be lying if I said that I haven't used it before. As far as images, I think I used it one time because I didn't have a good picture of barbecue wings. So I did use AI to create a picture of barbecue wings. But yeah, that's probably what I would say. Yeah, Pixabay, I've used that. I think royalty websites, Unsplash, if you are looking for stock photos, sometimes they work. I've used stock photos for campaigns before, typically if I don't have certain photos of specific needs. So like, I don't have any really good pictures of people kayaking or doing some water sports, and we didn't have the time to turn around or the budget to make it happen. So I would get some like really close-up shots where you couldn't really tell where it was. You would just see like the water, maybe the side of the kayak or the paddle in the water. So things like that I think work pretty well. I will say I would be cautious. Many years ago, I was putting together this presentation and I used a stock image and it was literally a fishing boot in the stream. And the background was so blurry, you literally couldn't make anything out other than the fact it was a tree line. But I did have this tree expert see my presentation and tell me, that's not Southwest Virginia. I'm like, how do you know? And they're like, oh, that tree only grows in the Pacific Northwest. I'm like, how can you even tell what tree that is? Like, it was so blurred out that, you know, you just couldn't tell, but they knew. So yeah, just be careful if you use stock images, because I think people can catch up on it a little bit. And there was a few in my presentation when I was making the persona, that lady that was the literary Leah, that came from Unsplash. So yeah, Pixabay, Unsplash. There's another one, I forget what it's called, because you can also, you have to be careful, but some of these sites you can find royalty-free music as well. Just be very watchful of what the copyright says. I think it's best to find what they call original music on Instagram when you're looking for that. Or if you have it in the budget, you can get a royalty-free music license subscription, usually for about $20 a month. I will say to everybody that is looking for more stock stuff, like stock footage, stock photos, stock music, video effects, help with editing software, there's a website called Motion Array that I'm testing out right now. It's $40 a month, but you get access to tons of things. And as long as your subscription is active, everything you use is licensed. So that's probably the safest route to go for things like that. Okay, yeah, Envato is a great one. And the way that I try to balance not playing favorites is I try my hardest to just do things in rotation, or try to be as generic as possible. So there's different ways, because like I don't ever want a business to think that I favoritize one over the other. So sometimes if I've got a campaign coming up, we'll just try to send out an email to everybody and just see who's interested. And if we get a response back by the deadline of they're interested, then they're the ones that get included in whatever it is. If we're talking about travel writers or influencers, a lot of times it depends on who the travel writer or influencer is. And we kind of let them pick and choose where they want to go based on the story they're trying to tell. Because obviously we wouldn't want to bring a travel writer to town and stick them in places that don't really fit their purpose. But as far as just everyday generic content, a lot of times I'll try to be all inclusive. So if I'm doing a post about coffee, I have 3 locally owned coffee shops in town, technically 4. I don't really ever push the chains. So if I'm going to be telling everybody about our awesome coffee, I'm going to list out all 3 coffee shops. Now, if you've got, say, 20 or 30 businesses that fit into a category that you want to talk about, maybe find ways you can niche down so you can only include a smaller amount, because including, more than generally 3 in a post kind of gets a little overwhelming. But we also try to rotate it. So I have a spreadsheet where I just have everybody listed, and I just kind of keep track of when I promote them. And then I try to make sure that the next time I do a promotion, that I try to include different businesses than before. It doesn't necessarily always happen, but it also depends on who's willing. Because I do have some businesses that are like, no, don't really push me right now. I can't handle it. Maybe it's staffing issues, or maybe they just don't want the media, or they've got some changes happening, or they want to do it at a later date. So there's different ways you can do it. Newsletters. There's a newsletter I would tell you to sign up for. West Virginia State Tourism Office. They do a great job at promoting West Virginia. It's very beautifully done. It's very interactive for the user. There's minimal words. They kind of focus more on the iconic imagery to get your attention, but they tend to stay a little bit broad. I've noticed that the State Tourism Office here in Virginia, when they do their PR leads, basically they send out and say, hey, here's what we're looking for. Well, they include whoever responds to the call. So that could be one way you could do things to be safe about it, is just send out the request to all your businesses that are relevant to whatever you're working on. And then whoever answers back, they kind of would get first preference. It's interesting.
Other questions for Chad?
Oh, and Gene had asked me to maybe give a couple tips with the pictures. YouTube, I would say, would be one of your best friends if you are photographically challenged. YouTube is a wonderful resource to teach you just quick, fast, easy tips and tricks. And I don't know how everybody else's destination is, but here in Abingdon, we have the Virginia Highlands Camera Club. It's a group of just photographers. We meet once a month and we just share photos with one another, but a lot of them are they range from amateur to professional. So in some cases, you might have something similar in your community and have some amateur photographers that just really love your community, and they're already taking beautiful photos, and you could reach out to them and ask if you could use some. Some people are willing to do that for free. Some might have a licensing fee. Some might just want a shout out. So there's a lot of different ways you could go with that route too.
All right, last call. Let's see. One more in the chat.
Yeah, Chelsea, I'm kind of the same way with UGC. I looked into a company called CrowdRiff. And for everybody on the call, if you don't know what UGC is, that is user-generated content. And there are companies out there, one of which is named CrowdRiff from Canada. They cost a pretty hefty fee, but they allow you to track hashtags, geographic locations, and basically try to generate pools of images for you to use. I'll give you an example. So at my bookstore, the way my bookstore operates, we work in conjunction with another business in town where essentially we keep everything up to date. We do the marketing, the promotion, we keep everything stocked and cleaned, but my wife and I are both working professionals, so we're not in our shop every single day. So the coffee shop that we're attached with, they help us with our sales. With that being said, there's not always somebody in our shop watching other than our big brother cameras that are hiding in the corners. So we do see everything. And we've saw a lot of professional photographers use our bookstore as like a photo shoot studio. And although we don't have a huge problem with people taking pictures in there, there's 2 things that happen. One, they often use our products as props, which causes damage to the products. And unfortunately, we just have to eat that cost. The other issue is nobody ever tags us. So we would probably be okay with it if the photographer, or at least the people that had the picture taken, would be like, go check out this beautiful space, or at least try to give us something in return. We also have people that come in and take selfies and do all these things that we would love to share those photos because they would be huge marketing resources, but they just don't tag us. We even have signs up saying, please tag us in your photos. We would love to hear about your experience, but they don't do it. I've heard from other restaurants and businesses, it's kind of the same deal for them. So I don't really know how to fix that. We've tried to run contests from the tourism department, photo contests. Sometimes you can get great photos, sometimes not so much. I find I have a similar problem to you, is that there's not enough people in our area using the correct hashtags is probably part of the problem, because people are taking photos, but I'm not always seeing them. They're not always tagging us. They're not always showing up. But if we do find ones we like, I just send them a direct message on Instagram or wherever it is, and I just ask if we can use it. Yeah, that was kind of the problem with CrowdRiff and some of the other UGC content things for us too. Later.com, it's a social media planner, way more affordable. I believe they also have a UGC pool, and we tried to use it on like the $30 a month plan for a bit. But we just weren't seeing the pool of images either. And I don't know if it's just because we know that we have the tourists, we just don't know where the pictures are going.
All right. Well, that sounds great, Chad. The town of Abingdon is very lucky to have you as its marketing and events manager. It's helpful too that you're also a small business owner here in your hometown, which is very great. You can visit the bookseller on Court Street in Abingdon. We want to thank our partners for this new knowledge, which includes the town of Abingdon and the Washington County Chamber of Commerce. Join us on April 16th for our next new knowledge, when Allison Mays with Virginia Tech will present a program on time management strategies for success. And as always, you can see our new knowledge programs on our YouTube channel from Virginia Highlands Small Business Incubator. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chad. Thanks for attending, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody.